December 9th, 2024, and we are back again with this new edition of our geopolitical show where we discuss the major events that are happening in the world, the major political events, military events that shapes the life of all the human beings that live in this world. So without further ado, we go back and we kind of develop this story that we are developing and discussing for the last week or so that has probably shook the world just yesterday, when Syria, the Syrian Arab Army collapsed without even showing up a fight. The Syrian president Bashar al-Assad, who had been, or whose family has been ruling Syria for the last 50 years now, has been the closest ally of Russia, Soviet Union for the last 50 years, had fled to Moscow last Sunday. I can't stress enough how earth-shaking this event is, and I will develop this vlog of mine by telling you the geopolitical impact of this story. This collapse of Syria, so sudden a collapse, has shaped the world to its core, I would say. I think after the collapse of Soviet Union in 1991, this collapse, more than the collapse of the Iraqi regime, has shook the Middle East, has shook the nature of the Middle East, the maps of the Middle East for centuries to come. You see, the Sykes-Picot Agreement that happened in 1918 has collapsed. The map, the balkanization of Middle East, which happened in 1918, has re-emerged with a new kind of Middle East, which I am going to develop. The first thing, and I think the most important thing, geopolitically speaking, is the collapse of the axis of resistance. The so-called axis of resistance, which is led by Iraq and which is supposed to stretch from Lebanon, is now collapsed. Iranians, or people who have sympathy with Iran or its causes, I have to give you a very, very shocking news that this is a collapse of the axis of resistance and the collapse of the Iranian power, and the re-emergence of the Sunni Wahhabi alliance, of the Sunni Wahhabi dominance in the Middle East. It might be hard for you to swallow this, but that is the reality. So just before we kind of develop this, I just want to talk about the ontology. So for people who do not understand or do not have a great interest in geopolitics, it will be clear for you. Axis of resistance, basically, I want to define this term. Axis of resistance basically means the Iranian influence, which has strived to give a pushback to Israeli interest or Zionist interest in Middle East, and it stretches all the way from Iran, as you can see on this map that I showed you about the Middle East. It stretches from Iran to the Shia corridor in Iraq. Stretches, then it touches Syria, or it links. Syria provides the cog in the wheel, the link, and then it went back to Lebanon, south of Lebanon, where the Lebanese resistance is based. If you take out Syrian puzzle from this, there is no land connection between Iran and Lebanon. That means there is no access now. There is no link now. And with this strategic defeat of this Syrian Arab Army, of this collapse of Syrian army, I'm afraid this would be a beginning of the end of the Palestinian resistance, in the Lebanese resistance in Israel-Palestine conflict. So I'm going to now discuss this impact of this disaster, of this earth-shaking event in Syria, where collapse of the Syrian Arab army, with the impact on Syrian people itself, on Syria itself. You see, Syrians, people who belong to Syria, I have to give you a bad news. There is no more Syria anymore. The Syria that is known to the world, the map that is known to the world, has collapsed. There is no Syrian Arab Republic anymore. There is no Syrian Arab Army anymore. There is no establishment, the Alawite establishment, which has ruled Syria for the last 50 years. There is no such thing anymore. It has collapsed. It has vanished. It has, became a cloud of air in the sky. It's no more Syria anymore. That means there will be a sectarian tensions in Syria from now onwards. People who had taken over power in Syria, this Salafi dominated, these rebels, the so-called rebels or so-called terrorists, these people, they have no organic political support in Syria. These people have no political origins. They are basically the tools of the Western intelligence. Whatever they want to tell you about it, they have no political backing in Syria. Whatever you want to say about the Syrian Arab regime, they had their base, they had their Alawite base from which the establishment was formed of Syrian Arab Republic. I'm afraid these people are completely beholden from the military aid, from the financial aid, from the logistical support, intelligence support of Turkish intelligence, of Western intelligence, and of Israeli assets. These people who have come to power have no organic connection with the Syrian public, and that means it's going to be a real tough period for the Syrian public. How are they going to revive, to reassert themselves after this collapse of the Syrian Arab Republic? Second country that I want to talk about, which I think has gained significantly, I mean it's a master stroke if you want to talk real and hardcore political terms, real political terms, is Turkey. Erdogan, especially Erdogan. I'm not talking about Turkey per se, I'm just talking about Erdogan. Erdogan has gained a lot out of this. Syria, the collapse of Syrian Arab Army, collapse of the Syrian Republic, with the aid, intelligence support, material support, logistical support provided by the Turkish intelligence, provided by Western intelligence through Turkey, meant that Syria, the loss of Syria is a gain to Turkey and its Turkish aspirations, the Erdogan's aspirations to become a new Ottoman Empire. See, if Syria wants to carve off Aleppo, all this region from Aleppo, where Sunni dominated region lies, that means the territorial growth of Erdogan, territorial growth of the Ottoman Empire. Erdogan has been praying or has been seeking this kind of territorial expansion since the weakening of the Syrian Arab Republic, and we have seen again through a kind of nexus of Western nexus of its own scheming, Erdogan has reasserted himself. But I'm afraid Erdogan has made a hard bargain. Erdogan, through its scheming mentality, had kind of backstabbed Russia and backstabbed Assad. With this prop up of this intelligence support, this HTS organization which has taken over Syria, the Palestinian resistance would be crushed. You would see Turkey, who is the closest of ally of Israel, who had been providing cheap oil, cheap Azerbaijan oil, Baku oil to Israel since the last 14 months, where this onslaught, this genocide, this Holocaust has been perpetrated by the Israeli regime. Israel is being supported, is being aided by Turkey, by its oil supplies. You can see this Middle Eastern eye story on the screen now, where how Turkey had been able to provide oil, cheap oil to Israeli economy to make it afloat in these hard troubled times. And I'm afraid Erdogan has traded money, has traded dollars for the dead bodies of the innocent Palestinians. So hats off to you, Erdogan. You have gained your Ottoman Empire on the dead body, on the blood of Palestinians. Thank you so much. The next country I'm going to talk about in this analysis is Iran. You see, Iran, who was on the verge of becoming a regional superpower in Middle East, who had tentacles or who vowed to have tentacles right away from the Sistan, Balochistan in Pakistan up towards Mediterranean through its connection from Iran, Iraq, Syria, and then Lebanon. They have been cut to size, cut to pieces by Israel. hard to swallow, hard to believe, but if you look at the facts on the ground, this big puzzle, this Syrian puzzle, this cog in the wheel has been taken completely out. But just one go from by Turkish intelligence, by Turkey itself, by Israel, by the nexus of Salafist groups, and by the aid and abetting of British intelligence and American intelligence. This is no secret now how Jake Sullivan in 2012 said to Hillary Clinton, his boss, that in Syria, Al-Qaeda is on our side. WikiLeaks revealed that. Everybody knows how this mysterious organization ISIS has worked to the eventual help of the Israeli interest, of the US interest in Middle East. And now they have taken this big prize, this Syrian prize, with a collapse of the Syrian army and with the collapse of this corridor, which was used to provide support, land connection from all the way from Iran to Lebanon. And here I want to talk a little bit about the Iranian revolution and the Iranian regime itself. I have a feeling that after the death of President Rouhani, who was also strangely, died in this plane crash in Azerbaijan, in all the countries in the world. Azerbaijan, who I just told you now, has been providing cheap oil to Israel, this so-called nominal Muslim state. President Rouhani was strangely died in this plane crash. And since then, the events I'm noticing are very, very mysterious. Iran, who knew or who knows or should know that any rapprochement or any sort of sign of weakness, reconciliation with the Americans could only be at the betrayal of the Iranian revolution, are seeking rapprochement with the US, are seeking close connections with the US. And the events which are happening, the way Ismail Haniyeh was killed in Iran, this could not happen if there is an intelligence support all the way from Iran itself. The way Mossad has penetrated to kill Iranian nuclear scientists, way Mossad has penetrated to conduct operations in Iran, I'm afraid there are moles in Iranian establishment now which are working to destroy Iranian revolution. For now, the policy hasn't changed, but ipso facto or de facto, the way Iranian regime is behaving is very, very mysterious. The way Iranian government is behaving, the way they did not come to aid of Syrians, although Syrians have to kind of put up a fight for themselves, but the way they kind of withhold the support at the time of this onslaught that was coming from the north of Turkey is very, very strange. So a big loser, Iran, with its size, with its tentacles now cut, has now become a kind of a small Gulf power only. It has lost its influence suddenly in this great event with the collapse of the Syrian Army, collapse of the Syrian Arab Republic. Iran has lost the most in this Middle East, in its Middle East affairs. Next country I want to talk about, which is also a biggest loser in this Syrian disaster, is, I'm afraid, Russia. Russia, who was engaged in Ukraine, who had his eyes off the ball, so to speak, in Syria, who could not able to focus on Syrian affairs because of its ongoing war in Ukraine, has lost the most from its Syrian debacle. Well, just a week back, just when the Aleppo was fallen, Vladimir Putin has taken resignation of its envoy in Syria, of its military envoy, the head of the Russian contingent in Syria, and then I guessed Vladimir Putin knew that the game is up, especially the game is up as far as the Russian interests are concerned in Syria. because Russia and Syria had very close connections. Their Tartus base in Syria, the Russian air base, Russian naval base, which has been present for the last 50 years due to sovereign concessions given by the Syrian regime in 1970s, would be closed for now, because you will see that will happen as the Americans will kind of home in, the Israelis would kind of home in and crush the Syrian assets, Syrian Arab Republic assets, and it will force Russia to vacate its Tartus base in Syria. The US, which has a stated interest to eliminate any sort of Russian influence in the Middle East, has now completed its mission. With the collapse of Libya, with the collapse of Iraq, the collapse now of Syrian Arab Republic, there is no country who has any serious military connections with Russian state, with the Russian Federation. This is a debacle, strategic debacle for Vladimir Putin, for Russian interest, and for the balance of power in the world. Middle East has now completely been swept by the Western interest. It's hard for me to say that, but you have to see the reality. Syria, the collapse of Syria means the collapse of the Russian interests, of the Chinese interests in the Middle East. I am just going to come and talk about what is the significance of this to China. But mark my words, at this point in time, there is no country all the way from Maghreb in the western Atlantic coast to Iran who has any military connections with Russia. That means the end of Russian influence. That means the end of the new global world order that was emerging. I'm afraid that project has now taken a setback, big disaster for Russia. Finally, I'm going to talk about the prestige of China and Russia, but more specifically China. You see, this reversal of events, this collapse of Syrian regime, geopolitically will impact China also. With the rise of the re-emergence of Turkish power, re-emergence of Ottoman power, Turkey will start playing its muscle in China. Why do I say that? Uyghurs have a very strong connection with the Turkish Islam, Turkish people, and they have long-seated interest. The West has been trying to take or make ingress in China through Uyghur Muslims by stoking, this terrorist fear, this militant fear in China, because West want to stall Chinese development, especially the development of the western part of China. Uyghurs have close connection with the Turkish Islam, with the Turkish intelligence. You will see that this issue of Uyghur Muslims will going to come up in the future, and it will create tensions between West and China, and it will create turmoil in the Chinese Western development. Just mark my word, the way they have stalled the Chinese growth in Pakistan, the way it has been rolled back by the Pakistani establishment of Pakistani regime against Pakistan's own interest, you would see that there would be more tensions in the upcoming days in the Western China through Uyghur Muslims by stoking this fear. So that is what I wanted to cover about this, I think, a major political event, major geopolitical event which has happened in the last 20 years or so. It is more important, I would say, than the collapse of Iraq and Libya, because Syria, with its strategic importance and its importance to Russia and importance to the axis of resistance. I hope you enjoyed it. I would appreciate if you make your comments and feedback so we can refine our analysis, we can crystallize our analysis in the upcoming days. Thank you so much.